propun să nu mai facem pauză și să trecem la următorul panel de ping-pong talk, de situația Europei, în care vor dialoga și ne vor prezenta o situație, o radiografie a Europei din punct de vedere al jocurilor de noroc, Lucien, Wijsman și Zoran. Zoran? Yeah? Lucien, please.
I think this is already the difference between operational people and legal people here. You really came prepared with a stack of papers and...
No, it's a kind of rank list, you know, for ping pong competition.
Correct.
I'm kidding, you know, there is the common and way to find out the best ways to struggle with such a challenges nowadays. I have to say that I'm really glad to see you again, a lot of you, after 2 and almost half a year of COVID infection, pandemic, and now I found that a lot of things changed, but changed somehow in a way it could be better for the industry if we use it in a proper way. I don't want to talk too much about legal advantages because the whole trend in the Europe is about tightening things with legal opportunities because all governments are looking nowadays much more than earlier. It's hardly to believe, but much more than earlier. They are looking for money and they are trying to find money where they think it is. And the gambling industry is one of such a kind of industries. There are a lot of stereotypes about the great money is there. Some money is there, of course, but the great money, it means that a lot of people think that whole money which come in the industry is whole money, it stay in the industry. But of course we all know that it is not true. Operational expert will say much more in details, but I have to emphasize some different kind of things which can be challenged in the next period, and it is influence of previous period. Different kind of limitation in the industry is a trend for many years ago. Taxes, AML, GDPR, protection of vulnerable groups, some ad restrictions, etc. 2 crises influenced. One from the past, it's a pandemic, COVID pandemic, and now clashes and war in Ukraine. We shall see what is going on with that, referencing to influence on food and energy. And it means that could be, depending on how it will last, how long it will last, it depends the influence on the whole system of economy in the world, not only in Europe. And 2 European actions, just for the beginning. One is Digital Service Act, and second, European digital identity. It is going to be adopted in the days we expect now. I will finish first with kind of wide framework of whole situation. Of course, COVID speeded up transition to online gaming, and especially to the mobile applications. I'm pretty sure, and my colleague will say much better and nicer, that casino players, they will stay mostly in land-based casinos. But the situation with mobile apps, with online games, all kind of games, it was really speeded up from COVID pandemic and lockdown. For example, some data says that it was about 10 years to build up about 25% of part on online games, whole kind of games. Now, for little bit more than 2 years of pandemic, it's about 65%. It means that 40% it was raised participation of online in whole spectrum of games, including, of course, land-based. So I will finish the first impression with that.
And then I'll pick a couple of words from what you said there and throw the operational perspective into it. Where being Dutch and having studied a bit of law, I like to be the devil's advocate. And there are two things that you say, that governments are looking at raking in more money from gaming, and at the same time there is more and more talk about AML. And in the Netherlands, so I'm not going to talk for other countries, I've been involved in a LinkedIn conversation. It started as a conversation, and then very soon after that I started receiving hate mail in private messages from people who took very strong positions against what I said. Because I read that Holland Casinos is very active in stopping AML in the casinos. They actually did not allow 400 and something people to play in their casino based on AML regulations. And the question that I then posed on LinkedIn was, I'm a bit naive. Can somebody explain me what AML is? Anti-money laundering. And when you try to explain to me as if I were 4 years old, how an individual launders money in a casino. Because if you have €100,000 dirty money from selling white powder, and you go to a casino, 3 things can happen. You walk out with less than €100,000, you walk out with €100,000, or you walk out with more than €100,000. But in all 3 cases, it's still dirty money. I sort of miss how the individual player can launder money. I think I've had 26 different answers here from no, but you get a winning document and you get documents. And well, if that is true, that the tax office is stupid enough, if at the end of the year somebody presents to you 6,000 winning documents and says, I won 10 million in a casino, and the tax office says, okay, then it's okay, then you have to fire your tax office. They can't be that naive. If somebody presents such a stack of winning documents from a casino, it means that there is money coming from somewhere else, then I would investigate that. But I think it goes a step further, this whole AML thing. Most of the casinos that I know incentivize their management, give bonuses to their management based on revenues. How can you expect your management to actively stop the best players you have from entering the casino? Because it would kill their own bottom line, yeah? It would mean less of a bonus. And the third thing that I don't understand, and that is where I really got into conflict with somebody who worked for the Dutch government, is that I say, let's accept as a given that there is an amount of money in the country which is the result of dirty activities. And with that money in the Netherlands, you can do nothing. You cannot buy a car, you cannot buy a boat, you cannot buy a Chateau Petrus, a fairly expensive Pomerol wine in a restaurant. You cannot do anything with that money. Why don't you allow people that have dirty money that goes to go to the casino? You pay tax. In the Netherlands, the win of the casino goes to the state at the end of the year. You pay your employees and. By not allowing that money to be being spent somewhere in the economy, the dirty money has only two places to go. Into Bitcoin or abroad, to countries where they don't have AML regulations. I was in Tirana not so long ago, and let me tell you, the AML regulations in Tirana are somewhat lax. And I saw Dutch people there. Actually, people who made their income from selling their products in the Netherlands. Young people. And all the money they had was not through the tax office. So I don't fully get it with the AML. I don't fully get it.
Well, as all legislation or rules, AML also is challenging and has its bright and dark side. You know, that it is life. It is hard to compromise everything. I will try to put on the table simplified challenge of AML rules in a way of common people, employee in the gambling industry, from the lowest level, just common employee. Because of some assessments made about AML in most countries, those industries, both land-based and online, are under high risk of money laundering. Because of that, some banks, especially in this region of Eastern Europe, they avoid not only to open lines, financial lines for companies, but to common employees working for gambling companies. They avoid to open credit lines for common people, and it's a terrible thing. Also, for common players. I don't think, and I do not speak about serious players which has a kind of idea to launder something. I'm talking about common people. Because of the situation that they are detected as gamblers in a way, some banks refuse to open bank cards, especially credit cards, for such a kind of people. In that way, they push those guys, those persons, to use cash. And we know, everybody knows that the main idea of anti-money laundering is to control the money and to avoid, as much as possible, to avoid use cash. In opposite situation, bank system by itself somehow push some people to use cash. It's a kind of stupid situation. But there is a sentence from my corporate life. I argue terribly with one lawyer working for a company I was employed. And finally, when I pushed him that I had a right in that moment, he said, well, you are guilty because everybody knows where logic stops, law is starting to become on power. And it was the highest argument he said, and I gave up at that moment. So I don't want we give up. We have to fight in a proper way. Associations are the good way, excellent way to try to explain to politicians how world round around. Talking about legislation, there are some examples, some of them are very good, according to my opinion, of course. I will give you some of them. Let's say in Poland, very interesting solution. They are going to penalize owners of premises that host unlicensed slot machine gaming. I have never heard until then that somebody want to penalize owners of premises. You know, do not, it is not meaning of owners of machines, but owners of premises. And I think it's a good solution to let's say, penalize black market. The second example is Belgium. They are going to, it is a kind of trend, to severely restrict gambling ads. It's a serious problem, generally speaking, not only for land-based companies, but also for online. Online is a kind of, let's say, a little bit better position, because in this moment you can avoid in a way somehow some let's say restrictions, but generally speaking it's a general trend. And UK as a leader of regulations in the Europe has set stronger and more perspective rules on identifying and taking action for protective at-risk customers, which online gambling operators will be required to follow from September of this year. Well, this news is really unclear in this very moment. I have to mention, I mentioned it about 2 years ago here in Bucharest, that UK authorities, they punished severely some companies with not clearly defined rules about having employees to track problem gamblers. And the judgment was they were guilty because they do not have, sorry, they did not have in that moment certain number, I emphasize certain number of employees with obligation to follow problem gamblers. Which kind of certain number is it for one company? 10, 100, 1,000 or something, but certain number. It looks it could be such a kind of rule. It's very difficult. And finally, Germany. Also a few years ago in Bucharest, I told to audience that Romania in that time and also in nowadays has much better regulations of gambling market than Germany. Some of audience was surprised about it, but I'm really personally convinced that it is true. Nowadays they try to establish joint gambling authority on federal level, and transitional rules will be in place until authority assumes all its responsibilities by the end of this year. So all of those changes emphasize one thing: rules are tightened and will be tightened more. Licensing is the law. You can't start the business without proper licenses, and of course we can expect in future some more tax to rise. Fortunately, there is a good news about taxes that I couldn't find any stupid tax as Once, it was about 5 years ago, in one country, they had a special tax for movie industry, incorporated in gambling industry as a tax. And I didn't find nowadays such a kind of stupid taxes in the industry.
But there were still taxes on winnings and taxes on the bet. I think what is relevant for a lot of people in this room is that there is a tightening of regulations in Europe, but it doesn't start in the land-based environment. It starts online. And the standard online is that you know who is playing and you know exactly the buy-in and the cash out, you know the number of sessions, you know changes in playing behavior. And I think where the regulation goes, know your customer and AML, is based on the assumption that you have all the information about the player. And land-based, that's not the case. I don't know of many countries in Europe where it's an obligation for the player to identify himself when he's at the machine or at the table. I don't know of many countries in Europe where players are not allowed to buy in cash. And if what is happening now online, if the regulator understands that the tools that you have online, if they're going to extrapolate that, if you want, to the land-based environment, then I think, and I'm not going to advise governments on that, but I think that within the foreseeable future, cashless in land-based operations is not an option, it will be an obligation. I think it will be an obligation. And the obligation will be that you have to identify at the position where you play, be it a table or be it a slot machine, the casino needs to know who is there, and then you can buy in. And that buy-in then very likely is not going to be in cash. And there is room for improvement there. I play in many different European countries, and what I notice is that the whole AML, the implementation of the way that casinos look at any anti-money laundering seems to be a bit all over the place. We are very fixed on the moment that the player cashes out. In certain countries, if you cash out €2,000, then you have to fill in a piece of paper. Nobody asks me how much I cashed in. I was in Riga last week. There was a guy sitting on the table throwing €1,000 cash, every spin on the table. Nobody asked him a question. I bought in for 500 and I cashed out 2,000, chips for chips. I said, give me 2 plugs so I can take them to my room and come back tomorrow. And then I had to fill in a document. I said, but can you explain this to me? The rules are a bit unclear, they're a bit all over the place. And I think that's where, going forward in the next couple of years, you will see more standardization, first, and secondly, it will be much closer to what happens online. And that is a bit of an issue for the gaming industry, because in many countries where I go, and of course it's not all the same. And my biggest customer is SBM in Monte Carlo, so that's been my biggest customer for the last 6 years. It's a bit more extreme there, but in most countries, 5% of your customers bring 50% of the revenues. 20% of the customers brings 80% of the customers of the revenues. Now within that 5%, a part of you don't want to lose any of that 5%. You don't want to lose anybody in that 5%. They're so important for the bottom line of casinos. So if we're forced to do our AML rigorously, vigorously, that might hurt the 5%. And there is a very clear trend that I see pretty much everywhere in Europe post-pandemic. And it's not only in Europe, by the way. Less players bring more money. That's the story in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Germany, all over Europe. There are less players in casinos than there were before Corona, and the results are higher. Less players, more money. That's the trend. And I'm not sure if that's a healthy trend, but it is a trend nevertheless. And then, and that goes back a little bit to what we were talking earlier about, I think most casinos are looking at the next generation of players that they want to bring into the casinos. And there is a very healthy debate there. What do we have to do to bring a newer, usually younger generation of players into the casinos? And it starts with, so who are they? What age group are we talking about? We're definitely not talking about 18-year-olds, although the 18-year-olds are online. So they might want to come to your casino at one point. But once you find out what the age group is of the people that you want to bring, casinos run into a wall. And that is that the people that they want to bring into the casino and the people that they currently have in the casino are so far apart in what they expect that you can't put them under one roof or in one room. I think a lot of casinos are really afraid to create the environment what your 25 to 40-year-old fun player who comes in a group going to a casino is expecting, because if you would create that, a fairly big part of your players would say, yeah, but I don't want that, I go somewhere else. And I think that is a situation that is very difficult to solve for most casinos. Where I see a convergence to a younger category of players, what it usually, I'm going to say 99% of the casinos that are successful in bringing a younger generation of people into their casinos, what they have in common is they do it in a separate room. They don't do it on their main gaming floor. It includes interactive games. Usually roulette arenas where you have a dealer and you have these electronic roulette stations. What I see there, the pulse arenas, and Holland Casinos takes that a step further. They have a pulse arena and then they have 00 easy roulette and a wheel of fortune and some trademark license games there. So they create an area in the casino where the payback percentages, RTP, are lower, where there is interaction with somebody, where there is somebody presenting and trying to create an atmosphere what these people are looking for, and where more than half the revenues doesn't come from gaming. So they sell food, they sell drinks aggressively, upselling. And they accept that that part of the casino is not going to make them a lot of money during the rest of the week. There is one thing that I realized while I was in having a lunch, and that's we're all talking about hybrid. We're bringing a roulette wheel online, so players can play online. So we're bringing a lot of the things that we do is bringing land-based product online. Well, actually, that's what Dan is doing as well. What I don't see at the moment is that we're bringing online to the casino. I don't see that. I don't see how players are allowed with a telephone or a tablet on which they already have an account online to do something with that in a casino. And I think that's part of the solution as well. If you have people online and you want to bring them land-based, allow them to bring with them what they already use, the telephone, to play on a slot machine, to play on a roulette table. They know how to use that thing, they're comfortable with it, and they can take pictures with it. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is the first step of that. I think these pulse arenas are the first step in that. And the suppliers, of course, are not going to tell you this, but you really don't need a terminal to play on a roulette wheel in a casino. You would save yourself quite a bit of space and quite a bit of capex if players could just sit there in a theater environment and play against the dealer there with their mobile telephone. I think that's where we are going, slowly but surely. And I think that's where we have to go if we want to bring a younger clientele to our casinos. The current slot machine is not going to do the trick, because that is a solo experience, and that is what people who want to go out in weekends don't want. They want to experience things in a group, and they want to create memories, and on a standard slot machine, that cannot be done. But it needs a mindset from the operators. There are still many casino operators out there that will not allow you to take a picture from a slot machine when you have a win. That's a mindset thing. I'm going to throw the microphone back at Zoran.
Of course, everything is okay. It is not real ping pong talk because we are both on the same side of the table, you know, literally and really. And I will try to close my part of this session with some data I found, some researches. And one of such kind of researchers said about players' expectations. it means about online mostly. 8 from 10 players said about 80% said that fast payout are important when casino online provider can avoid. It's the most important thing for choosing the company, choosing operator. And also 80% of players will decrease deposit with operators that offer instant payout. Instant, it means 24 hours per day. And of course, there is a good result of researches for Romania. According to the opinion of leading managers in European Union, Eastern European market is hit by actual crisis, but Romania and Czech Republic are seen as the leading markets in this moment, having the most opportunities in time it will come for future growth, of course. But generally, it depends on political, economical development influenced mostly by Ukraine conflict. Talking about Western European market, it is seen as a mature and future liberalization will likely not increase the growth in the same way as it was seen for Romania and Czech Republic, especially because of some limitations to advertising and probably increased tax regulation in the next period. I have to emphasize at the very end, influence of two future acts of European Union. It is not directly in connection with the industry, but they will influence it for sure. One is, I mentioned it, Digital Service Act, which will influence whole industry, whole spectrum of industries connected to the internet. And the second is European Digital Identity, which is expected to solve a lot of different kind of identification online, mostly online. And it will influence in a way like GDPR influence, but I expect not with such a kind of punishment proposed. And finally, for my marketing solutions, I found some data that marketing moved to online mostly, not only according to the COVID, but generally speaking, it is a general trend 10 years ago, and it lasts for future years. And very interesting is our colleague from Betano, I think she mentioned Twitter and Instagram. It is going to rise, marketing use of such a kind of social networks. But the biggest challenge is to be creative. Of course, marketing is challenging to be creative, but especially for such a kind of networks. For example, the only serious influence on such a kind of networks has Paddy Power, which is well known as an atypical, very creative marketing maker, and it could be expected that only very courageous and the fastest marketing managers could provide such a kind of influence via, let's say, new social networks. I don't talk about Facebook because I'm treating it as an old social network, and it is under kind of traditional marketing use. I will finish with it.
Thank you very much, Zoran. Thank you very much, Lucien, for your insights from the European gambling industry. Unfortunately, the time ran out for your dialogue. And